Good evening, everyone. I'm Rabbi Paul Kerbel. In 33 days, I will celebrate my first anniversary as the Rabbi of Temple Beth Mekor Chayim of Cranford, and it's wonderful to be with you and to work with all of the rabbis, and especially want to thank our leader here, your new rabbi, Temple Emanu-El, for coordinating and hosting this great program. Tonight's a very special night. Poor Shavuot, Passover has Seder and so many things to do to get ready, and Sukkot has a sukkah and lulav and etrog, and Shavuot is not as sexy in some ways, but it's of course truly an important holiday because the centerpiece of our tradition is a belief that God gave the Torah to Moses on Mount Sinai. Now, exactly what God gave to Moses is not clear. It's not clear from the text of the Torah. No one can tell me what the Torah is saying about what actually Moses got. Did Moses get just the 10 Commandments? Did Moses get the 10 Commandments plus the next chapters dealing with civil laws? What was written on the tablets? We're not really sure. But what I wanted to focus on tonight is a book. I'm holding the book up for you. It's called The Torah Revolution. It's by one of my teachers, the late Rabbi Reuven Hammer. Started out in the United States as a rabbi. When I was in rabbinical school, he was the dean at Neve Shechter in Jerusalem. He was in charge of all the Jewish theological seminary programs in Israel. And he was also a prolific writer and thinker. He had a piece regularly. I don't remember now for all the holidays, but he wrote regularly for the Jerusalem Post. He wrote many other pieces. He wrote a very important work on entering Jewish prayer and understanding the prayer book. And one of his last writings, he passed away, I think about a year or two ago. Rabbi Hammer wrote this book called The Torah Revolution. And what I really love about this book, it's published by Jewish Lights, which unfortunately also no longer exists, although the book probably exists, is Rabbi Hammer takes 14 ideas that are in the Torah that are unique to the Torah that were really a gift to human society. Namely, most of these ideas didn't exist previously to Judaism. Because we only have 20 minutes, I'm only going to share 5 of the 14 ideas. You're welcome to pick up the book. I don't know if you have it in the Temple Emanu-El library, but I want to just share with you 5 of the ideas, which you'll see listed here. And they are of the 14 that he listed. Number 1, morality is God's supreme command. That one of the core tenets of the Jewish tradition is that we be moral, ethical people. Dennis Prager, the commentator, called it ethical monotheism, right? That we have a belief in God, but one based on ethics. Number 2, that human life is sacred. Number 3, that all human beings are equal. Number 4, that the needy must be cared for. And number 5 is the Shabbat. And we will, just spend a few minutes on each one and share a few thoughts with you as we think about the Torah and what it means to us today and how it can be relevant for us today. So if you go back and look at the book of Genesis, and I don't have these texts for you, but I just want to share with you a few ideas, and you can, during the evening tonight or over the Shavuot holiday, look them up. Genesis chapter 3, verse 9, the famous Adam and Eve in the garden, right? And they do exactly what God tells them not to do. They eat from the tree of knowledge. And God says to Adam, where are you, right? And it's not that God didn't know where he was. God knew exactly where Adam was, but God was passing along a message. And I think the message, where are you, is really a message of humanity and morality. not where are you to serve me as God, but rather where are you in creating a human society that God wishes to see on earth. As we know from the very beginnings of the book of Genesis, God is not very happy with what he has created so far. As the Torah says, there is evil everywhere on earth. People are running to do evil. And I think as we think about some of the ideas of the Torah, one of the key ideas is that morality is supreme, that the Torah believes in justice and mercy. We have the wonderful story also in the book of Genesis, the story that you're all familiar with about Abraham negotiating with God in order to determine whether there are enough righteous people in Sodom and Gomorrah to keep, to keep that city from being destroyed. Abraham came forward and said, "Will you sweep away the innocent along with the guilty? What if there should be 50 innocent within the city? Will you then wipe out the place and not forgive it for the sake of the innocent 50 who are in it? Far be it from you to do such a thing," right? This is now Abraham speaking to God, right? You cannot do that. You're God. You cannot do such a thing. Far be it from you. Shall not the judge of all the earth deal justly? And I think that verse, that's Genesis chapter 18, verse 25, really represents what the Torah is all about. That morality, that being just, is core to what it means to be a Jew and to live a Jewish life. Some of you know, and correct me, Rabbi Prosnit, I don't know if it's in the Reform liturgy, La'el Orech Din, on the High Holy Days, there's a prayer in the Shacharit in the morning service about God as our judge and what kind of judge God is. And there's a statement in the Talmud that God spends part of Rosh Hashanah sitting on the chair of justice and then switching over to the chair of mercy. And what's interesting about that is that in some Orthodox traditions, the prayer La'el Orech Din is recited in some communities, certainly in earlier times, one day of Rosh Hashanah in the morning and one day in the Musaf service, because we're not sure exactly when God switches from justice to mercy. And so, therefore, because both are important, both having laws and following them, but also siding on the side of mercy at times, right? There's a spirit of the law and the letter of the law. And what God wants for us is both to follow laws, but also be just and apply mercy. You all know also the beautiful words that are from the book of Exodus, when the people of Israel sin at the sin of the golden calf, that God is patient and merciful, abounding in kindness. Hashem, Hashem, El Rachum V'Chanun. And we see in those words the importance of being just and being moral in our world. The second of the 5 statements is that human life is sacred. And you don't have to go very far. You can look at the headlines of today's New York Times and see a young woman who was burned alive because her brother felt that she married the wrong person. We know from the story of Abraham bringing Isaac up to the mountain, the binding of Isaac, right? Not the sacrifice of Isaac, but the binding of Isaac, Akedat Yitzchak, was juxtaposed to what was happening in the world at that time, that there was such a thing as child sacrifice, but not in the Jewish tradition. Human life is sacred. Every single human being is important and valued. And the thing that's propelling our response to the COVID crisis today is that human life is sacred, right? Some people are suggesting that if you look at the numbers, well, it's mostly older people and it's mostly people in nursing homes and we have to reopen society. But who are we to make such a decision of whose life is more important than another? And it's something that we are all watching and grappling with, reading the stories of the tremendous strength and fortitude and hard work and effort of doctors and nurses and first responders of all kinds, by the way, including rabbis, because we are also, unfortunately, when those pass away, many of us have spent quite a bit of time in the last month when it's not the best to be out and about, to be at cemeteries and to participate in funeral services and to lead them. But human life is sacred and it's kadosh. And Martin Buber, the great Jewish philosopher, said that the main goal of being a human being, a mensch, is to be humanly holy, right? So we view every life as sacred. You all know the statement in our tradition that he who saves one life, it's as if in the Talmud, he who saves one life, it's as if he saved the entire world, and he who causes one human being to die is responsible for death in the world. We want very much to have a society where we care about each and every human being. We worry about making sure that people around the world have what they need to live a life that is meaningful and just according to their society. Of course, one of the parallels to that is the idea that all human beings are equal, right? Our tradition teaches us that we all come from Adam. Why do we all come from Adam? The Midrash says the fact that we all come from one human being says that no one can say, my blood is thicker than your blood. I'm more important than you. I come from a higher strata of society. I come from priests, or I come from a certain caste in society. But rather, all human beings are equal. All human beings have the right and the need to participate in the world in an equal way. The book of Genesis says, God formed a human being from the dust of the earth. He blew into his nostrils the breath of life, and the human being became a living being. At the time of God's creating, Genesis chapter 5 says, God's creating humankind in the likeness of God did he make it. Male and female he created them and gave blessing to them and called their name humankind on the day of their being created. When we speak about our being created in the image of God, I think we should understand it not as physically like God. We don't know what God looks like or is, but our belief is that God is not a human being, but rather we're created in the image of God in our thinking and in our moral consciousness, right? We're created in the image of God because our tradition says that just as God cared for the sick, we should care for the sick. God clothed the naked, we should clothe the naked. These are the ways that we can live in the image of God. And I want to share with you this one thought from Rabbi Hammer's book. And that is from a man named Henry Alonso Myers of Cornell University, who wrote a book, Are Men Equal? And he wrote, the lessons of history are clear enough. The doctrine of superiority has always been, even in its noblest forms, a means of dividing people, of setting one class or one people over others and against others. The proposition of equality, on the other hand, by its very nature implies the unity of men. Already a giant force in world politics, it will in time prevail over armed force if men believe it to be true. So Myers is suggesting that the only reason to divide people up and to have superiority is that we want to say that some people are better than others. And we saw it ourselves, our own people. We see it time and time again, both in Nazi Germany. We see it in the Arab world today, the anti-Semitism and the images used to describe us as human beings, as monkeys, as animals, and not as human beings. And the message of our tradition is that all human beings are equal and everyone is in the image of God and we must treat them that way. Number 4, the needy must be cared for. one of the key themes of the Torah is taking care of those in need. We see it in numerous places. We see it in leaving a corner of the field. On the holiday of Shavuot, we read the book of Ruth, right? And what are Ruth and Naomi doing? They are following the very words of the Torah. They're allowed to follow the reapers and the gleaners and picking up what is left over. The Torah forbids those who own a field or an orchard to pick every last apple or to pick every last stalk of wheat, but rather to leave for the needy. You all know that there's tremendous food insecurity in our world. One major scholar at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology has calculated that there are close to 1 billion people in this world who live on less than $1 a day, on $365 a year. That's their total income. 1 billion of the 9 billion people on the earth. And here in America, I 5 years ago moved back up north from Atlanta, Georgia. In the state of Georgia, for instance, with 9 million people, there are about 1 million people who are food insecure. The Atlanta Community Food Bank, like the Central New Jersey Food Bank, provides food to over 800 food banks throughout the state of Georgia. There is huge food insecurity. We're seeing it even more now. You can all watch it on the news, and you do watch it on the news, right? In our Jewish community in the New York area, approximately 20% of all Jews live below the poverty level. And in Israel, the number is very similar, about 20% of people in the land of Israel who live below the poverty level. So one of the key edicts of our tradition is a belief in taking care of those in need. And in our tradition, we believe very strongly. I mean, how many societies place constantly in front of us to take care of the orphan and the widow, to take care of all of those who are in need? The philosopher Emil Fackenheim wrote, he was a professor in Canada and then moved to Israel and taught at Hebrew University. But who except Jews, and following them Christians, has ever heard of a God loving widows and orphans? A God or gods loving heroes, sages and martyrs one has heard of. All these, however, the martyrs included, are winners. Widows and orphans, in contrast, are losers. The stranger is the third in the trinity of losers, beloved of the God of Israel. I know how important in the Union of Reform Judaism and in conservative Judaism, how important it is to take care of the poor, to take care of the needy, that tikkun olam, that repairing our world is a central pillar of our synagogue life, of our social action, and of our caring for all human beings. And finally, Shabbat. Rabbi Hammer suggests, and I did a little research, and I have not been able to find another source, but the very idea of having a day of rest is instituted in the Torah. Up until the Torah, no society, there may have been a society or group of people that rested, but not formally in a religion until the Torah did someone say, 6 days you shall work, and on the seventh day shall be a day of rest. And we just read a couple weeks ago in the Torah about the sabbatical year, the idea of working the land for 6 years and letting it rest on the seventh year. The idea of a Shabbat, I mean, just think about it. Think about if everyone in our world, and I don't care what day, if Muslims, the Shabbat is Friday. For Christians, it was moved from Saturday to Sunday, I think in about the 3rd century, okay? Because the original Christians were Jews and observed Saturday, and to distinguish Christianity, it was moved to Sunday. But imagine if every person in the world actually took a day as a day of rest. Whether we drive or not, whether we use electricity, I don't want to get into the particular laws of Judaism, however we observe them. But just imagine a day where we slow down, we have a meal with our families. I remember a couple of years ago, a psychologist wrote an essay that was in a number of newspapers, and he said every family should have one meal together, one dinner together each week. And I go, okay, Jewish people, check that off. Shabbat dinner. When I was growing up, and I grew up in a conservative Jewish home, my father was a Jewish Federation director. We were very involved in the community and very involved with Israel, but my parents, from the day I was a little boy, belonged to a conservative synagogue. And every Friday night, we always had Shabbat dinner. We often had guests at our home. We lit candles. My mother made a beautiful meal. My father said the Kiddush, the prayer over the wine. Now, we might have watched TV afterwards. My parents might have gone shopping on Saturday or to the hairdresser. But Friday night was central to my family and to many families. I recently served as a rabbi in Roslyn, New York for 3 years. And my Persian congregants, Friday night is sacred, that the family joined together for a Shabbat meal. So Shabbat is a day of rest. The Torah speaks about it being a rest for everyone, including servants, including those, which of course led to certain leniencies to allow others to help Jews so they didn't sit in the dark on Shabbat. That was not the idea. Shabbat was to be a day not only of rest, but of renewal. And for us today, however we observe the Shabbat, I think we can say that Shabbat for us is an opportunity to slow down, to recognize that the other 6 days we create, but the seventh day we recognize God as the creator. We try to minimize our creativity on Shabbat, but that the Shabbat is so important to our health and our well-being and being a community. Henrietta Zold, who was the founder of Hadassah Hospital, after she left the United States and went to Palestine, was asked many, many years ago, she, I think, created Hadassah in 1912 or so. She was asked how she could work 20 hours a day. And she said there are two things. One is that I have a cast iron stomach, and the other is that I light candles every Friday night. Now, she came from a religious family. Her father was a major rabbi in the Baltimore, Maryland area. But she kept Shabbat. Herman Wouk, the famous writer, wrote very poignantly in his book, This Is My God, about Shabbat and about how he would leave the Broadway theater when they were preparing the Caine Mutiny for it to go live. And he would leave on Friday afternoon, go home for Shabbat, come back Saturday night and say, I gave my best contributions after resting on Shabbat. I hope for all of us, we can find a way to make Shabbat more a regular part of our own lives and try not to let the world intrude on it. It's even harder today with all of our electrical devices. So these are just 5 of the ideas that, according to Rabbi Hammer, did not really exist in human society until the Torah was revealed and written, and they form basic aspects of society today, American society, world society. And my hope and prayer is that we can continue each day to study a little Torah, learn about these basic ideas of Judaism, and help make our world a better place. Chag Sameach to everyone. I hope you enjoyed it.
Thank you very much. Chag Sameach, everyone. We will continue, and that was right on time as well.
I tried to keep it right on time.
That was very impressive. I'm looking forward to learning the other 9 as well. So thank you, Rabbi Kerbel. We will be signing off this link, and we have a next study session starting momentarily.
Thank you for
some time to get some cheesecake or a milkshake or some cheese or something like that.
I'm going to have cheesecake right now.
Yeah.